Welcome to today's podcast episode of Little by Little Homeschool. I am joined today by Mystie Winckler from Simply Convivial. I'm so excited to have you here. We've got some great questions, but can we start off with you just sharing a little bit about yourself so the listener can get to know who you are?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is fun. My husband and I are both homeschool graduates, and then now we are homeschooling our 5 kids. Actually, we're only going to be homeschooling 2 this coming school year because we have 3 graduates. So our oldest is married. He's a real estate agent, and they're expecting their second baby. And then our second son is in college, and we just graduated our first daughter. And so then we'll just have a 15-year-old and 12-year-old at home in the fall. So our home and our homeschool looks a lot different now than it did, 10 years ago, but it's all been great fun.
I can completely relate to that, to how it looks so different, and you don't realize it until the first one kind of goes off and you're like, wait a minute, I feel like something's
missing.
Yeah, something's missing. And then, it's kind of like when you have a bunch of small children and maybe grandma's watching 3 out of 4 of them, and you have one. You're like, wow, this is so easy. You get to that with the homeschool where you're like, I'm only homeschooling 2? Now I'm just down to 1. I'm like, wow, okay. You never thought you would get here, but.
The funny part is that, I actually love homeschool planning and like choosing all the books and everything. But what we did for homeschooling with the older kids was great, and it worked well. And so we're going to be doing the same thing, but that means I actually don't have any homeschool planning to do. And it's like, I'm kind of bummed.
I totally feel you too. I used to love going to curriculum sales and looking online and doing a lot of research. It was so much fun. And now I'm like, oh, this is maybe my second, third year of just kind of either doing, like you said, what they did, or just doing something very different. He's done a lot of electives, and it's like, oh, I miss that part. So I live vicariously through everybody else. Today we're going to talk about homemaking and taking care of our home as we homeschool. Can you share a bit about your personal journey, about shifting your perspective about homemaking?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled. I'm the oldest of 7, and I got married young. I got married at 19, and so I went into that young married stage pretty sure I already had it all figured out. And very sure that I was just going to get everything set up and working, and I would totally nail it. Like, I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to stay at home. And when I started homemaking, at first it's fun. I made a price book, which was this, like, before we had phones in our pockets, right? Writing down all the prices at the grocery store so I could make a smart menu plan. I made everything very complicated, but it looked great on paper. And I was setting up all these systems and very into it as a project. And then when the babies start coming, you can't keep up those complicated systems, and they don't provide the help that I assumed that they would. I assumed that if I got everything set up just right before we even had kids, then everything would just run kind of automatically, and I could have the babies and like no big deal. Everything would just happen, and that was my vision of homemaking. And that is not what happened.
That's funny.
That is not what happened. And so, fast forward a couple years and into baby 3, and I decided, instead of all the fancy, complicated systems that I had created, probably I was the only one who actually cared about how the house was kept up. And because, all the kids are little, does it really matter? And so I decided, if I'm the only one who cares and I'm doing it because I care, then I could try not caring. Maybe I should try not caring. And so then I went from putting all of my time and energy into a bunch of complicated systems. I really put my energy and my attention into doing as little as possible. And it turns out that if you don't care, you really can do almost nothing. But things are not very good around the house. It catches up to you, and everything kind of slid to the point where I couldn't pull it back together in an afternoon if I wanted to, especially with small kids underfoot, some of whom weren't napping in the afternoon anymore. And so I got thrown off, and the house was a disaster all the time. And I was trying to still think of myself as a competent homemaker, but the reality is that I wasn't doing it at all. And so that was kind of my rock bottom moment where I realized that, just God brought the conviction. And I realized that even in my early days of homemaking, when I thought that my complicated systems were going to fix all my problems and I was going to nail it, I was coming even then from a place of disrespecting housework. And so that just naturally led to not doing it. They were tied together in that I didn't actually think that housework was worth my time at all. So I either wanted a system that put it on autopilot so it didn't take any of my mental energy, or I just didn't do it. And so I read all the books I could get my hands on, because I am an oldest homeschool child. And it seemed like some were helpful, but it seemed like there were either the super practical books that were mostly written by people who couldn't imagine not living in a clean house. And I was past that. Or they were written just very theoretical, like the spiritual side of your heart and your attitude. It was there, but it wasn't practically tied then to actually living it out. It was theoretical. Oh, your home matters. But they were like two distinct genres that didn't really seem to touch. And so I kind of made it my project then for it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. Then, another baby comes and another baby comes, and you go through the postpartum lows, and then you try to climb back up. And I did that several times while trying to hold that balance between learning how and why the housework itself mattered, and yet not putting so much importance on it that the relationships with the kids or the education didn't suffer, because I couldn't put everything into just keeping the house clean. And so how could I both value it and not make it everything?
There's a balancing there, right? It's kind of like having fine china in both hands, and you're trying to do that. And then there's you're also juggling maybe, and then you've got babies hanging on to you. Yeah, it really is. I think that it's a struggle that I've had too, of balancing where I'm not worshiping and idolizing a perfectly clean home, but also having a home that's going to function well, that everybody can live well, and it's a healthy environment to live in.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the spiritual aspect. So what does the Bible say about our work as homemakers, and how should it help us see meaning in our daily work?
So, in Titus 2, where Paul is giving instructions on what women are to be talking about and teaching one another, it says that women are supposed to be busy at home, kind, and managing their own households. And so if it's important enough to call out and make universal like that, then we should be taking it seriously as a calling, not as an optional thing that some people can do and some people can't, because actually all people need homes. And, if we think about it, Jesus said that when he ascended up into heaven, he was going to prepare a place for us. He's going to prepare a home for us. And home is a theme throughout Scripture. And so our homes can be and should be a little small taste of what God's home is like for people. And so the meaning isn't just in how all the beds are always made and the floor is always clean and kind of that checklist mentality of if I do these things, then we're good to go. But it really is a bigger, it's more about the atmosphere of the home. And what is the way that we live in our home teaching us about the way that God interacts with us and the way that God treats us as his family and the home that he's preparing for us. We can be working that out in small ways in our own personal homes. And that's meaningful and exciting. And there's room for personality and differences within that as well.
I agree with that, with the personalities. And how you're talking earlier about books that were for people who maybe want to be super organized, and then there's others who maybe are not. And we have to lean into how God has wired us and maybe the eccentricity of our home. Some people have more colorful homes and some are not as colorful because that's just not who they are. And we can get onto social media and be like, oh, my house has to look like this person's house because that looks so great in little squares, but it might be too many things. I remember having little kids. I used to have tons of little knickknacks and little decorations, and then started having kids, and I was like, they're grabbing it all. So the coffee table that used to have cute little things on it had nothing.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay. And I put them up higher. Then I was like, now I got to dust all these things. And so for a while, it was just, there wasn't as much, and I still don't have them. We've moved a couple of times. And that's when you really start to evaluate, like, what do I really want in my home? Yeah. And so, and it can change. I just love that you're talking about just the atmosphere of our home. And I know that not all of us grew up in a house that had a good atmosphere, but we can change that story, right? And we can create an atmosphere that our family feels welcome in. That doesn't, and you're saying that doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. I mean, if there's sticky spots in the floor, it's okay. Everybody will be okay. You can go to bed and nothing's going to fall apart.
It is. And it's holding that balance between the sticky floor and the dust, and that is not the essential piece. And yet that doesn't mean it doesn't matter at all. It contributes to the atmosphere of the household, but really more than just the state of things is how we are handling our house, our home, our environment, the people in that environment. And so it's less about, the state of the house being this pass-fail test that someone could walk in and say, oh, obviously everything is good here because it passes the cleanliness test. And instead, it's more like, no, watch mom in the home. And what does her demeanor say? And what does the way that she handles life say about the people, about the house, about life itself? And so we want to be responsible and caring and attentive. And sometimes that means taking care of the housework, and sometimes it means not. It's actually an exercise in growing in wisdom. So it can't be boiled down to checklists.
Yeah, I like that. The balance part you're talking about. And at some points we have to be more responsible for our home and then other times more responsible for our kids. So think about when our kids are sick. The house kind of usually falls apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we are caring for sick children. And so it can't be like, hold on, kid, I know you're going to puke, and I'll bring you a bucket in a minute, but I got to finish scrubbing the toilet. The toilet does need to get scrubbed, but not in that moment, right?
Probably after. How about after the puking, then clean the toilet?
Exactly. We know that everyone's circumstances can be a little bit different, but most of the listeners are homeschooling their children. And so we're trying to balance a lot of different things. So what advice about homemaking would you specifically offer to homeschool moms?
Yeah, I think it's very hard, especially for those who grew up going to school, or maybe kids were in school and now you've brought them all home and you were used to a different kind of life, basically. And homeschoolers are doing everything in their home. Like there were about 10 years where we were homeschooling all 5 kids and my husband worked from home. Like so much was happening in our home. And so if I viewed my house as something that was my pet project that other people were messing up all the time, then I would have been in a constant state of agitation and irritation and, just not nice mom. But instead to step back and say, okay, I'm the home manager. And the home that I have is one where all this action is happening. So there isn't going to be that spot in the day where no one's here and I can just go clean everything up and then they'll come back and everything will be good. We're all here, all doing things all the time. And so we're just going to have to do little bits of tidying up as we go, because that's the kind of life we are currently living. And actually, it does change. So you can't just ever get to that spot where you're like, okay, now this is what works. We'll do this forever and all time. As soon as you think that, everything's going to change. But so I started seeing the house as a stage. And there was a particular play, a particular drama being acted on our stage. And I was a stage manager. And so you have that balance where the action needs props, right? There's going to be stuff on the stage and it's going to be used. It's needed. And then you need times where you can clear the stuff or change the stuff out. So if you think like the dining room table, sometimes it's a school table, then it needs to be a meal table. And you're just making these scene changes, but you can't just get rid of all the stuff because it's actually needed for the work that's going on. And the point is that play, it's the life being lived, and everything about the home is there to help facilitate that action. So it's not the point, but it is helping the action or getting in the way.
I think what you're saying that really hits home is that our attitudes matter the most. And
yes.
If our kids are feeling like they are going to mess things up, that adds a level of stress to them. And
yes.
Sometimes we just have to let it go and be like, great, the living room was clean for 5 minutes. That was fantastic 5 minutes. And like you're saying about the things, my husband and I still kind of laugh about how there used to be so many toys in the living room. And in the evening, I'd be like, okay, just push the toys to the edge so that if I have to walk through here in the middle of the night, that I'm not going to step on, Elmo and he's going to start talking or something like that. And it just slowly started to happen that they would play in their rooms and their toys didn't come out as much. And now there's not a toy in my living room and they're gone most of the time in my, I can fix up my couch and it will stay like that. And it makes me a little sad, actually. I'm like, nobody's made a fort with the couch in a while. And you get to the point, and I remember that bothering me, being like, oh, now I got to put the cushions back again because I want to sit here and fold some laundry after the kids are in bed. And now I look at the couch, I'm like, would it be weird if I made a fort with the cushions? I don't know.
It's like, what are couch cushions for anyway?
Who wants to sit on them? Let's make a fort instead. So yeah, it really is our attitude in the season, even though it feels long, and how you're saying, for about 10 years. And I feel like, it depends on how many kids you have and their spacing and stuff. But I think for a lot of us, there is like an intense 10 years.
Yeah.
And it, give or take a little bit on either end, but there's at least 10 years there and the moms listening are probably in that 10 years. And yeah, and it's our attitude, and we need to bring that to Jesus and allow him to work that in our hearts and give us the patience that we need.
Yeah. And that desire to have things stay put and be permanent it's avoiding the realities of life. And so instead of looking for that point where it will stay, you'll do something and it will stay done, and thinking like that will be the ideal, that is what will make me happy, to be able to see all the action happening in the home, the forts being made as life being lived, then you're focusing on the good and what your home really is for, which is growing and fostering, being hospitable to life and to these people. And if no one was there messing it up, then your home really wouldn't be fulfilling its purpose. It would just be a dead space. But we get our ideals set by magazine spreads or TV shows or the Instagram square, which are still shots mostly of dead spaces, not places where families are being raised up. And so that's a false comparison, creating wrong ideals.
That's a good term, a false. Yeah, that's a very good term for it. And I try to think to myself, I mean, I can easily say it now, and I'm sure everybody's heard this. You know, someday when you're older, you're going to say, oh, I'm so glad that my house was perfectly put together and curated and everything. Or you're going to say, I'm just glad the kids played. I'm glad that they felt comfortable and that there were toys around. And which would you rather look back on? And and it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard in the moment, but that's definitely an attitude shift. But I know we've been talking and using the word homemaker, at least I have been. Maybe because that feels like a more widely accepted term than housewife. But I was reading on your blog about these terms. Does it matter if we use housewife, homemaker, and could you share how this role is more than just getting toilets scrubbed and floors mopped?
Yeah, I mean, I like both terms. I like homemaker, I like housewife, and I think it's interesting to talk about and to think about for yourself and maybe have conversations with other ladies about, just because that role of stay-at-home mom has been so disrespected and diminished in the last several generations. And so to be able to confront our assumptions, like my realization that even my attempts to organize my housework was actually coming from a place of disrespecting the work, thinking that it didn't deserve my time and attention. And to recognize that historically, so a housewife is a more historically traditional term than homemaker. Homemaker is the newer word. And I mean, I like homemaker because we are making homes. It is a good anchor term, I think. Like, okay, am I making a home? That's different from am I cleaning a house, you know? But then housewife, it takes us even farther back historically, but also recognizing like it's actually not the fact that I'm a mom that makes me manager of this house, but that I'm a wife. And I, especially, you know, the stages that we're coming up into now, I know lots of older homeschool moms that after all their kids left, they felt very lost and like, oh, I don't have a purpose anymore because all my purpose was just raising kids. So what now? And it's easy at that point then to think, oh, well, now my home doesn't matter. Like now that it's not here for raising kids, the home doesn't matter. Either it becomes my dollhouse that I can just decorate how I want because it will stay put. Or I can ignore it now because it doesn't matter. And I can go get any old job, anything to get out of here. And so I think we need to just think about how we are considering our roles and our jobs, and that our homes are still places of hospitality and meaning and significance, even beyond the years of raising our family in them. We still have a family if we are just a wife, and that can be before you have kids or after the kids are gone. And there's still work for your home. Your home can still be a place of life, even beyond those intense years.
Yeah, so I try to think back to when it was just my husband and I and an apartment and learning my way as a housewife, because it was just he and I. I do laugh a little bit when I look back at like what used to overwhelm me.
Yes.
I would deep clean he worked a different shift, and so he would be gone on Saturdays. I worked during the day, Monday through Friday, and so he'd be gone on Saturdays. And on that Saturday, I would deep clean our apartment every single week and get all of our laundry done and all of the grocery shopping. And I mean, it was a very sweet season of that, but it did feel overwhelmed, like, wow. And then you have kids and you're in those 10 years that are intense and you're like, I can't even get one of those things done, in one day. So there are seasons. I like that you're pointing that out, and I'm getting to that further point there, and I can do things and my house will kind of stay clean. They're all out of the house for the day or something, and then they come home and there's a mess then. But it's our attitude towards it. And I think when that's properly in perspective, I'm entering this season okay. So, yeah, this has been really good. Thank you for sharing all of this, Mystie, and giving us some wisdom and guidance. So the listener wants to hear more because they're in those 10 years and they want to learn some from you. So where can we send them?
Yes, my website is simplyconvivial.com. And I also have a podcast called Simply Convivial with just 10 to 15 minute pep talks on keeping up that attitude while doing the work. And then I have a book. The Convivial Homeschool is one that's encouragement for that homeschooling stage. And then Simplified Organization, Learn to Love What Must Be Done, is my book about homemaking and learning to actually enjoy the work itself.
Wonderful. I'm going to put all those links in the show notes so y'all can connect, go listen to her podcast, check out her website. You have tons of information there, and then the books as well, so that you can hopefully feel that breath and that attitude change and the joy that should come with our homemaking. So, Mystie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Leigh.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If it was just what you needed to hear, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend? And if you would like to connect more, social media links and more are in the show notes just for you. I promise to see you back here real soon.